Good morning, lovelies. Today we've on the second part of a video looking at two common forms that you might find in your anthology poems. The sonnet was the first, which you just saw in the last video, and the dramatic monologue is the one that we're looking at now. So we're going to have a look today at the dramatic monologue and then just finish off with some other forms that you could be interested in and might crop up in anthologies, less likely to crop up in unseen poetry. So about the dramatic monologue, so it kind of, you have a character narrator, what we might call a persona, where the poet writes in a character of somebody else. That's why we call it dramatic, because it's obviously a bit of drama. And so, for instance, Browning, I don't think he is the psychopath that he comes across as in his famous dramatic monologues. Likewise, Carol Ann Duffy, who we'll look at, she writes lots of dramatic monologues, and I'm pretty sure she's not a lot of the characters that she presents herself as in those. So the dramatic monologue will also bridge a divide between poetry, drama and narrative. And what I mean by that, it is a poem, but it also it conveys a little bit of drama, so it wouldn't be out of place in a play. So for instance, some dramatic monologues that, say for instance, an actor might prepare for a casting might be something that they've taken from a drama, such as Shakespeare. So they might take a monologue or a soliloquy from a character in a drama to present themselves and to do for a casting. And it also has that sense of narrative, that it tells a story as well. So whilst it's not like prose, it does have that kind of element of a story too. And the main thing that a dramatic monologue will do is it reveals the inner thoughts and the psyche of a character. So it really allows us to get to grips with this, who is this person that the poet is presenting. And I'm always kind of interested, although I don't have any answers, as to why the poet decided to present the voice of that person. Sometimes it's a person that's been misrepresented or hasn't had a voice, or to give them a different kind of voice, or for us to allow to see a different side of them. But I do think sometimes the characters that we pick might reveal something about our own inner psyche as a poet or a writer. But that's just me with my psychological bent. I also need to think about whether there's an intended audience, because some poets, when they write a dramatic monologue, even though they're the only person speaking, hence it's a monologue, there is another person there. So in Robert Browning's poem My Last Duchess, we're given a role. It's like we're immersed into some almost like street theatre, if you like, that the poet starts and we immediately understand who they're speaking as. But we're also given a role, and that they're speaking to us, and they've given us a role as a character as well. So we have to think also about our character, or we might be just kind of like an eavesdropper almost, and the poem is just to reveal the insights of their mind. For instance, if you're doing Macbeth and you're looking at his soliloquies, that's not written to us, but it's written for us so that we can understand what Macbeth is thinking and feeling at various different points in the play. So this is a bit from My Last Duchess, and you'll see lots of bits of things at work here. I mean, the first thing I notice in the form is the neatness of this, and I don't notice this actually, it's not the first thing, but you won't notice the neatness. But look at this. There's a reason I put that, or blush at least, and I started because I picked a bit from the middle. But it's this. Look at the 10 syllable lines here. Or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked. Somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked. So you've got 10 syllables. It's really neat. And then you've got the rhyming couplets there: thanked, ranked, name, blame, skill, will, so on. So it's actually really, really neat. And it then falls into that iambic pentameter, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked. Somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked. So you can read it with that iambic pentameter kind of beat on there if you wanted. But what happens with it, you don't notice that neatness when you read it as a normal voice, for instance. Or blush at least, she thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-years-old name with anybody's gift, who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling. So you don't necessarily notice that iambic pentameter underneath this very kind of natural rhythm of speech. So that's one thing that's interesting to me about the form of this and how it's set out across those lines. But I also noticed, look at all these dashes and all of these caesura. So we've got one on the first line, I'll blush at least full stop. She thanked men. And then you've got all of these dashes and the exclamation marks in the line. And what you notice here, and you'll notice this very much comparing to the next poem we're going to look at from Browning, which is Porphyria's Lover. This character, his rage comes out from this iambic pentameter. The iambic pentameter can't control his inner, anger at his dead wife. And we get a sense of that kind of the passion, the anger that seeds below the surface of this man from the form of the poem and the way that anger comes out from and breaks out from the lines. So you can see it with this. She thanked men good, but thanked somehow I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even if you had skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wit to yours, for sooth and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. And we get that control come back at the end. I choose never to stoop. But look at those bits where we've got the monosyllabics. Apart from the disgust, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss or there exceeds the mark. That monosyllabic pattern there allows that anger to really come through. Each bit is like a pounding drumbeat. Just this or that in you disgusts me. And that's emphasized as well by that iambic pentameter. And the way that some of those words are left at the end of the line. Here you miss or there exceed the mark. You can see that kind of that forceful anger coming off the page there. And you can also see some of those sentences which are very long, but thanked somehow I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. What you've got there, those very long sentences that go across 4 lines there, is that kind of build-up of passion. And then you've got that who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling. So we've got some very interesting things there about how he's using the form of the poem, the way the words fall on the line, the way the words are emphasis because of the stresses of the poetry and the rhythm that help him create the character. So it's very much, for me, Browning, a technical master. It's very much about the engineering of his poems that make them work. So you can see the suppressed rage, the controlled rage, if you like, of this psychopathic Duke here. In Porphyria's Lover, we've got the opposite, and I've already emphasised some words on this. So Porphyria's Lover is just a guy sitting with the corpse of his lover. And so this is another bit from inside the poem. Again, you've got that same neat meter. So be sure I looked up at her eyes, happy and proud. At last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. Surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew. So you've still got the very neat meter and the rhyme scheme, the new grew, I surprise, which shows that very control. But this never breaks that control. It's always that beautifully neat thing. So he does leave words dangling on the end of the line, which gives us a little bit of a pause, like surprise made my heart swell. And we have that miniature pause because of the semicolon that comes before surprise, and then the line break after surprise that makes surprise just that little bit more emphatic, if you like. This is a guy, I'm going to read it to you, you'll see. He's strangled the woman with her own hair. And he's just, he never breaks the meter. He never breaks the rhyme. He never breaks the rhyme scheme. He never breaks the rhythm. And it reminds me very much in Hannibal Lecter, Hannibal, Hannibal the cannibal, serial killer. He kills a nurse by biting the nose off her face whilst he's in custody, whilst he's in prison. And it says that he was attached to a heart rate monitor, and a heart rate monitor never went over 70. You know, he got no emotional arousal. And I think I see this the same thing in Porphyria's lover. The difference is that Browning's writing this character before we know anything about psychology, and Hannibal Lecter's written, you know, post-psychology and post everything we know about psychopaths and, you know, years and years of study. And Browning, for me, I think this is why I love his poetry so much. It's because he just creates this persona by using the form and the natural rhythm of language that conveys the kind of this man is dead inside, you know, for me. Let me just read it to you, you'll see what I mean. Surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew while I debated what to do. That moment she was mine, mine fair, perfectly pure and good. I found a thing to do, and in all her hair in one long yellow string I wound 3 times her little throat around and strangled her. You know, there's no emotional intensity there. And look at all of those long vowel sounds as well that contribute to that. In one long yellow string I wound 3 times her little throat around. It's really long and drawn out. There's no emotional arousal or that in anger that we saw in the last one, and strangled her. And you know, that just forms a part of that sentence. There's the slight caesura afterwards, the full stop. No pain felt she. And very, very different use of monosyllabics there, which is wonderful. And you've got this control there, this lack of emotional arousal, which is completely different than the poem before, which is why I love Browning, who's just like this normal poet guy, who is exploring all of these the psychopaths in his dramatic monologues. Next, we've got Havisham, which is from Carol Ann Duffy. She writes, I think, for my mind, the most prolific use of dramatic monologues that you'll probably come across. Certainly at A-level, you'll find things like The World's Wife, where she writes a series of monologues for different characters, different female characters, to give them a voice. So this is Havisham, which you may also know from Great Expectations if you're doing that as a novel. So, no, it's not actually. Sorry, it's Medusa. I've mislabeled it. She starts with giving a voice to Medusa, this misunderstood character. A suspicion, a doubt, a jealousy grew in my mind, which turned the hairs on my head to filthy snakes, as though my thoughts hissed and spat on my scalp. Look how she's using those monosyllables at the end of that stanza. My bride's breath soured, stank in the grey bags of my lungs. I'm foul-mouthed now, foul-tongued, yellow-fanged. There are bullet tears in my eyes. Are you terrified? So that's just a little bit of Medusa there. And you can see she's doing the same thing sort of 160 years on from Browning, where she's giving voice to a character using the same kind of techniques. She doesn't have the same meter. It's not in the same style of engineering in the iambic pentameter or the other rhythms that Browning's using, but we still get, through her use of repetition and those monosyllables, she's still using the form in the same way. So the other forms of poem that you might look at that are kind of, I talked about in a second video of the series about how these are almost like cookie cutter molds that you can just pull out and you can just, you know, you can use for particular effects. So if you've got an idea to convey, you may find one of these is a perfect vehicle to drive your ideas. So we've got the epic, we've got the ode, we've got the pastoral, we've got the ballad, the elegy and the lyric. Odes, for instance, well known for written things of appreciation. So when I was a 16-year-old, I wrote there was a lad in our 5th year called Stuart Brown. I don't know why we called him Dodie, but I wrote an ode to Dode, which was my appreciation of the magnificence of this creature, this year 11 boy who I was madly in love with. Unfortunately, my A-level art teacher found that in my book and then read it out to the whole class, and it was much amusing. But, you know, we've got people playing around with pastiche and things like this. So the elegy was also this poem of sadness and funereal mourning, was then manipulated by other people who were then writing about, you know, a cat that fell in a goldfish bowl and so on. So people play with these forms throughout and use them for their various purposes. They're not particularly ones that you'll come across at GCSE. And you don't particularly need to know very much about them. I think the pastoral is interesting if you're doing love and relationships poetry, maybe the ballad as well. And there may be ones that you'll come across in your anthology, but though that, just to give you some idea of the dramatic monologue, the dramatic forms that you can pick out and the poetic forms that you can pick out as a poet when you're choosing to write a poem to think about, okay, well, which ones are going to work best for the ideas and the experiences that I want to convey. In the next video, I'm going to be looking at ways that you can then write about and think about form in order to write those into an essay. So I'll speak to you on that subject then.